That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, Kalen DeBoer is doing the interview rounds, and he had a couple of appearances yesterday. Got some pretty valuable information from that. First of all, I know that you've been busy. Have you had a chance to see those interviews, or at least see some of the things that have come out of those interviews?
Yeah, I've gotten the gist of it. I wanted to be able to watch that whole Cole Kubelik interview, but yeah, I've certainly got the highlights, and it was interesting that he did multiple interviews, actually,
Yeah.
multiple long form interviews, not 2-minute things.
Yeah, and I thought he was very informative. You know, we talked about, well, we're going to be discussing Josh Ford, some of the things he said about him. We're going to be talking about the tight ends. We're going to be talking about some of the coaching changes or additions that have been made, why we think that's important, a little bit of Terrence Green, the defensive front, the offensive front, what they look for as far as the offensive line. Just a lot of very good information. I thought Cole and the Martin Houston show both did a really good job as far as those interviews are concerned. We'll start with Josh Ford, though, because, you know, he talked about how physical Josh Ford has been, and he even kind of, you know, he understands Alabama fans. So as he's discussing what Josh Ford was doing to some of the defensive guys in the spring, he said there's a flip side of that, and people will kind of say, well, that's bad that you're having your defensive guys put on their back. Well, that's what Josh Ford is. He's a physical guy. He's a big body player, 6'6", 267 pounds or 66 pounds, one of the two, or maybe at 68. He's huge. He's a massive body, obviously. Since they've added him, I know that I've been super high on him. I know you've been super high on him. We understand what his role was going to be. But just what are your thoughts on what we've been hearing about Josh Ford and the fact that he continues to come up in some of these conversations in the offseason?
Well, I just go back to when he committed actually from Oklahoma State. Me and you were watching his highlight tape from Oklahoma State and sort of bragging on him then, and then what we heard from the spring lines up exactly with what DeBoer was talking about. He has been. It's crazy to me, really. I think with a skill position, Clint, most of the time when we hear an impactful skill position player, we automatically think of catches, yards, touchdowns, highlight plays. Well, Josh Ford's not that guy. He's a block first guy. That's what he's bringing to the table as a physical presence. And it's amazing to me that a guy that was bought in to do just that was still as impactful as he was and creating buzz and getting everyone talking about him. I think I mentioned in the last show or one of the last shows that, a guy I talked to close to the program that's there it practices, obviously, is employed there. As soon as spring practice was over and I talked to him about it, the first name mentioned was Josh Ford, the first name, which would normally go to a more of a skill type guy. But Josh Ford just showed up and announced himself as a physical presence. And what I want to remind people of, I know we're talking about how bad the run game last year was, and it was really bad. Well, the year before, in DeBoer's first year here, now the running back production wasn't great, but the overall run game production ranked in the 40s in America. It was like in the 40s. It wasn't 120 like it was last year. And why is that? Well, sure, the quarterback ran around a lot. He was difficult to get to the ground. But I would say an even bigger reason was the blocking you were getting from the tight end position with C.J. Dupree and Robbie Oost, who both proved they were NFL level blockers. That's why Oost was basically a star in Seattle last year, and C.J. Dupree was on the Patriots Super Bowl team. So, I think replacing those guys was something we really struggled with, the physical presence. But Josh Ford and the bigger, stronger sophomore Kaleb Edwards, it's going to be a lot more like Dupree and Oost. And last time Alabama had something like that, the rushing production was in the 40s, not the 120s.
I don't think we talk enough. First of all, we understand the importance of the tight end position to Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's offense. And Kalen DeBoer also brought that up in the interview. It has always been a critical position on offense as far as the flexibility that it can provide. A lot of people think when you talk about these quote unquote block first guys that means it's an extra offensive tackle. You're going bigger. It's limiting in some ways as far as the guys who can go out and actually be a capable receiving threat. That's not the case with these guys. They can be capable receivers. They can You can throw them the football. They're going to catch it. I think Kaleb Edwards has some ability after the catch. I don't think he's, necessarily, he's definitely not Josh Cuevas. He's not that type of guy, but I think he can be an adequate, reliable pass catcher for you, be a problem in the passing game. But what I don't think we talk enough about is at one point it was supposed to be Josh Cuevas and Danny Lewis. You're talking about a guy who was in his final year of eligibility and a guy who was entering his 4th year with the program, a seasoned veteran, had played a little bit, not a ton, but he was a guy who, from a development standpoint, was a lot more ready. And then when you lose essentially Danny Lewis, he's not available. And when he is available, it's very limited. You end up having to turn to a Kaleb Edwards who had just got on campus, very promising player. They fully expected him to chip in and contribute a little bit, but his role got that much bigger in year 1. Then as you progress through the season, Josh Cuevas ends up getting hurt. And during that time, the primary tight ends were a true freshman in Kaleb Edwards, a true freshman in Marshall Pritchett, and a redshirt freshman in Jay Lindsey. And when you're talking about such a vital position to this Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb offense, that is certainly going to affect your offense as a whole. Like, I don't feel like we talk about that enough. Now Kaleb Edwards has some experience. Marshall Pritchett is now going to be in year 2. He's got more development. He's bigger. He's stronger, and he has gotten his feet wet, got some meaningful action. That should help him. Jay Lindsey's gotten some. It's not a ton, about 95 snaps this past season, but that helps. But then you add Josh Ford, who brings that experience side of it. I just think that with where this tight end room is going to be this year compared to last year, it is going to make a much bigger difference for the offense overall than a lot of people realize.
Oh, absolutely. No question. And, the makeup of that tight end room, you've got an ideal mix and match situation where when you want to be big and physical, you can use Ford and Edwards. And when you want to throw the football, you can use Edwards and Pritchett. That makes so much sense, but it can't be a tell. You can't be that obvious. You can't use tight end substitution to announce to the defense if you plan to run or throw. So to make that work, sometimes you're going to have to throw the ball to Ford and Edwards, and sometimes you're going to have to run the ball behind Pritchett. The great news for Alabama is I think they're all going to be minimum adequate at those things, adequate enough as pass receivers, adequate enough as blockers. Then there's even other guys like Jay Lindsey, like maybe Danny Lewis, which I know you with your player rankings, I said Danny Lewis might be the hardest guy to rank in the whole thing because
I'm not even including him right now because I have no idea what to expect.
That's exactly what I did. I'm like, I can make a case he should be back with the guys that I would anticipate to redshirt, even though redshirting's dead now and doesn't happen. But you know what I mean by redshirt. Do I have him back there with the guys we'll barely see any at all, or is he 100% healthy and I've got to consider ranking him around number 20, assuming complete good health, 2025, somewhere in there? I didn't know where to rank him. So I basically just by default put him dead in the middle, saying, I don't know where to put him. I'm putting him right here in the middle in the 40s because I don't know where to rank the guy. But if he's healthy, he's playing for sure, and he's going to help you along with Jay Lindsey. And of course, Max Sutter's got fantastic long-term potential, but you're so deep at tight end, I can't imagine that we'll see too much of Max Sutter, even with redshirting now gone. And we definitely need to spend a few shows, I think, discussing how impactful the end of redshirting is, how impactful it is that overnight Alabama's roster got way younger, and it was already crazy young. Now it's diaper young because of 5 for 5. And but even though they're young, it is deep. And I think this tight end position, it's arguable. I think safety's the deepest position on the team in terms of guys ready to play well. Got multiple guys ready to play well at their spots. Tight end might be the second deepest position on the team in terms of, I think, guys that will do what they're asked of at a high level.
If they end up getting something out of Danny Lewis, I'll be pleasantly surprised. I think that helps Alabama, obviously with his seniority. Obviously, he's got the size. I think he does have somewhat of a balanced skill set. I think when you leave him in there as far as pass protection, he's pretty good. Like, I think he does a lot of things pretty well. The reason that I'm just not expecting anything from him, and then I'll let it be a pleasant surprise, is the tight end position, whether it be in the spring, whether it be yesterday in some of these interviews, like he wasn't specifically asked about Josh Ford. He was asked about the tight ends, and he ended up bringing up Josh Ford. Anytime that they've been asked about tight ends, no one that I can recall has brought up Danny Lewis. Like with Will Sanders, you talk about that left guard competition, and they bring up, hey, Will Sanders wasn't available this spring. We certainly anticipate he's going to be in that competition. Anytime you've heard tight ends, I just haven't heard, hey, we got Danny Lewis coming back. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone can point out where he mentioned Lewis. It's just that makes it a complete unknown to me. And so I didn't even include him in my roster rankings. Now, granted, what I decided to do was rank the top 60, let everybody else fight over whatever's below that, because you don't know who I ranked at the bottom. But at least get a huge chunk of the roster. Guys like Noah Rogers, I didn't include him either because I don't know when he's coming back, and I'm not going to rank a guy in my top 60 if he's going to be back for the last 2 games of the regular season or the postseason or whenever that the case may be. I've tried to talk about with some of the other wide receivers when he comes back, he's going to be a big part, but that's kind of been my approach with it. And Danny Lewis, it's unfortunate because he is a guy, one of the very few, a lot of players have entered the transfer portal over the last couple of years. He is one of maybe 3, Rico Scott, Jalen Mbakwe, Danny Lewis. Is there anybody else that I'm missing as far as guys that they talked out of the transfer portal?
Not publicly. I would assume I'm going to list names, but there's got to be many where they had last minute negotiations of the kid and his agent. I'm going into the portal unless we can reach a deal here. I'm sure that has happened repeatedly. But in terms of kids that actually climbed into the portal and then were brought back out of it, those are the names that come to mind for me. The ones that you just
for
listed.
Sure. One of the other things that he talked about was he mentioned something that I found fascinating. He was talking about offensive line and he was talking about Ryan Grubb, and Ryan Grubb, he thought Ryan Grubb was trending when he was his offensive line coach towards being one of the best offensive line coach in the game. And him having that background, him having a hand in things. You're talking about Adrian Clem. He just got Coach V, which I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. I would completely botch it. I can't even announce normal names correctly sometimes, but that's a guy who actually originally committed to Nick Saban in Alabama back in 2013. He flipped to USC, ended up working under Adrian Clem as a grad assistant at Oregon in 2022. He most recently was the co-offensive line coach at Stanford this past season, and then he was expected to be the offensive tackles coach and run game coordinator for Cal in 2026 before he ultimately decided to come be the assistant offensive line coach with Adrian Clem. That to me is a huge get for Alabama. I think Noah Fisher, the assistant tight ends coach, another guy who played left tackle both at Tulane. Well, he played offensive line at Tulane and South Alabama. While he was at South Alabama, Kane Wommack was the defensive coordinator. So there was some familiarity there. He was the starting left tackle. And he was a grad assistant at Louisville and worked with the tight ends and the offensive line. And Richard Owens was the offensive line coach for Louisville from 2023 to 2025. The number of guys who have like this, who are viewed as run game coordinators and have offensive line experience and tight end experience, they are trying to more so, in my opinion, unify this group. The tight end make the tight end an extension of your offensive line as far as the blocking. Doesn't mean that it's just going to be a 6 hog out there that can't do anything else. But, that to me, it's become very, very clear that it's not just, and we have continuously harped on this all throughout the offseason and even in the spring. You just look at their decisions. They understand the importance of having a run game. They understand that has got to change. They got to have a more physical, edgy attitude on the field. And they have been consistently bringing in guys that back up that belief. And when you talk about the offensive line and the tight ends, you're going to have a bunch of different opinions and a bunch of different guys who are weighing in, including Ryan Grubb, that I think is ultimately, hopefully it's not too many chefs in the kitchen. It doesn't become something like that, but I don't foresee it. Everybody's got roles and expectations as input that will be valuable. They're building kind of a brain trust to really elevate this offensive line and tight end room, which I think will ultimately really aid the run game as well.
Like you said, a lot of eyeballs, a lot of experienced eyeballs now on that position, more so than last year. And look, I'm not going to sit here and make up stuff or spin or blow sunshine about that. Each of these guys that they've bought in to be what I would call support staff guys, that's probably not the right term, but Coach Fisher, with the tight ends, and Coach V with the offensive line, and the other guy that came, a couple of guys have come from Southern Cal with Clem. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that individually those are phenomenal people and future NFL offensive line head coaches. I don't know that. What I'm telling you guys, what I do feel emphatic about is the message that's sent with these hires, that clearly getting more physical is a priority. And I know DeBoer said something that I think some people mistook for the opposite of that yesterday in the Cole Kubelik interview. Look, the hires are the hires, and the recruiting is the recruiting. They're clearly trying to get more physical up front. Now, not bigger necessarily, but more physical and more eyeballs on it, more ideas. And like you said, maybe there is a concern of having too many chefs in the kitchen, but ultimately, and this is true, a power dynamic within the staff. I mean, ultimately the offense is Ryan Grubb's, baby. He's in charge. And Adrian Clem is in charge of the offensive line and its production. Now, Grubb's got people working under him. Clem's got people working under him, and Richard Owens, in charge of the tight ends. Those people under him. I'm sure, as you said, they have a clear organizational thing happening, but the emphasis is obvious. In my mind, though, it's all about the personnel, because you can have the smartest offensive line coach on the planet Earth can work with me, every day for 6 years, and I'm not going to get one SEC defensive end blocked ever. So it's about the dudes that they have, and I'm optimistic that it can be, I'm going to say, better than last year, in terms of the run game and the physicality. That's all I'm asking for. I think sometimes people expect too much. They expect something was really, really bad a year ago, and now they expect it to be really, really great. I don't think that's realistic at all, but this is realistic. Even with all the change, be better than you were. And I'm very optimistic that they are going to be better running the football and having just a more physical brand up front.
I think with the passing game and what we expect it to be, it's going to continue, in my opinion, to have a dynamic presence at the quarterback position, regardless of who ends up starting. I think you got too many weapons in the passing game to, make this what I would call a run first offense. But I do think that even given the passing game before, it was like, okay, if you can get up in the 60s or 50s, as far as your rushing yards per game, I think that would be a tremendous improvement versus everybody knows that it would be a huge improvement, but I'm saying I think that would be good enough to give Alabama one of the best offenses in college football. I'm starting to get to a point where I feel like it can be even higher than that at its ceiling. There will still be some growing pains with this offensive line. It will take some time. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's all going to be fixed. It's going to look fantastic every time a running back touches the football. He's picking up yardage. The only way that Alabama doesn't lead the country in rushing yardage or top 10 or top 20 is simply due to volume. I'm not going to go that far. But what I'm telling you is that I think, especially as the season progresses, you're going to see it get better. I think even from the jump, the amount of emphasis that they've put on it will instantly make it better. It is to what extent. And I'm really excited about that. And something that Cole Kubelik brought up yesterday in his interview that I thought was a fantastic point is with having a Coach V available, before, when you just have an offensive line coach, you're kind of having to do all of the reps are being divided amongst all 5 of your guys. You've got one coach watching their reps and doing all that. Well, when you can divide it up, you can send, and Coach V was going to be the offensive tackles coach and run game coordinator at Cal. He was expected to already have this experience. You can split up interior offensive line, send the tackles with the tight ends, get them working more so in practice, where it doesn't become the entire offensive line and tight ends. And you can really start to divvy up the reps where you've got coaches focusing singularly on a smaller amount of players, and they're able to get more practice reps as a result, because you're not having to cycle through, okay, now we look at the tight ends and the tackles. Okay, now we look at the center and the guard. It's being divided, which will help maximize the time. I think that is a much bigger deal than a lot of people realize. So I'm excited about the offensive line this year. I'm getting more and more excited about it. I've been excited about it in years past. It didn't play out the way we all hoped that it would. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you, I'm guaranteeing that it's going to be fantastic. I just think it's going to be better. I truly believe that. It is to what extent, and even if it is not where a lot of people hope early, hopefully it's shown enough improvement for there to be some encouragement, and then people will understand as they get more experience and more comfortable playing alongside one another. Hopefully it ends up improving quite a bit. So do you have anything on the offensive line before we move on?
Nope, just excited to see these new guys. I wouldn't say it can't get any worse. I don't think that's true. As bad as it was last year, and it was bad, there's also, as usual, some overkill with how truly bad it is. I mean, it wasn't good enough, and that's all we need to say here. It wasn't good enough, and it needs to be better. I'll just also throw in, if you're truly terrible up front, truly terrible, you're not 10-2 and in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. It is impossible for an offense to function at all with a really bad offensive line. It wasn't good enough, and it needs to get better. I'm very optimistic that it will.
And I also will continue to reiterate every chance I get that while it was probably not going to be great regardless, I do think if you had a healthy Jam Miller, he would have made a difference. I think they were putting a lot of eggs in that basket. So let's talk a little bit about Terrence Green, because he talked about him specifically. Now, he was talking about the defensive front as a whole. They were talking about the size and the length that's been added. Kalen DeBoer said that was an emphasis for them, this offseason, that he has mentioned that before. And he was talking about some of those bigger bodies, Kedrick Bingley-Jones. He talked about Devin Tompkins having that bandit inside versatility and how he's just a really, the agility and stuff that goes along with his size is very impressive. We've talked extensively about Devin Tompkins. Both of us absolutely love him. But Terrence Green is one where, they were talking about, he said he added 20 pounds of lean mass this offseason. Now, granted, he went from being listed at 330 pounds at Oregon to 319 pounds at Alabama, and Kalen DeBoer says he is around there right now. So I think what they're saying, if I'm not mistaken, is he has transformed roughly 20 pounds of what was already on him into lean mass. I don't know exactly how all that works, but that's kind of my interpretation. Maybe someone who's a fitness freak can jump in and say you're completely wrong, or yes, that's exactly what he's saying. That 20 pounds of lean mass in this amount of time is pretty wild. I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but I mean, I'm not saying he's lying, but that is pretty insane.
That's crazy.
Regardless of if that's being fudged or whatever. Number one, I did see a very different looking Terrence Green from a body standpoint in the spring, and I'm sure that's only continued into the offseason. So I think when you talk about his size and mass and the fact that they've kind of leaned him up a little bit, I think that you're probably going to get the best version of Terrence Green, and I think he was a pretty darn good rotational piece for Oregon this past season. I think there's some pass rushing upside. I don't necessarily know that they're going to ever tap into that. There's been other guys. Tim Smith, I thought at one point had some pass rushing upside, never ended up being kind of that guy. But Terrence Green, bottom line is, when you're going against the Indianas and the Georgias and the teams that were able to run the football, especially tackle to tackle on you this past season, this is exactly why players like Terrence Green were brought in, and I think he's going to have a massive impact on that front.
Yeah, and it allows me to use my term of the summer, as I've come now to call it, depth of good. I mean, Terrence Green is one more quality body up front. Now, again, we're not going to sit here and tell you guys that based on what he did at Oregon, that you can expect greatness. I don't know how many of the defensive linemen this fall will be what we could call great, other than maybe Tompkins. I expect to be some version of great. I think London Simmons has a chance to be great, but what's exciting is the number of players that I do expect to be good. This tremendous depth of good. Terrence Green is definitely in that mix. He was ranked very highly in the transfer portal rankings, which I don't put much stock into, but it is interesting when your guys actually rank pretty high. I was looking the other day at this All-American type team, or best defensive tackles in college football this upcoming fall. 2 Oregon players were on it. This is why Terrence Green left. He was defensive tackle number 3. And you might think, why would the 3rd defensive tackle at Oregon help us? Well, when the first two guys are literal All-American candidates, you don't know how good the number 3 guy is. And it is someone that they feel can help us. And based on what we saw in the spring, there's a good chance of that. But again, the tremendous depth on that defensive line, and Terrence Green will be a part of it. I think Tompkins and Simmons play a ton of snaps. And then behind them, Green, Bingley Jones, Beeman, Faga, Steve Boomois. These guys are all going to play. And I think Terrence Green plays as much as any of them, not named Tompkins and Simmons, who I think will lead the pack.
You know, another guy that he brought up, he talked about Kedrick Bingley Jones, as I mentioned, and he just, once again, I said it very early in the process, I feel like he might end up being the most underrated addition that Alabama had in the transfer portal. And they had a ton of them. I would say most of what they were ranked 38th or 39th. And I think that they just got way more impactful players, way better players than people realize, with Josh Ford and, Devin Tompkins, even some of the guys, Caleb Woodson was not super highly rated in the portal. They got plenty of really quality players. But as far as guys that just, especially with the way the fans treated him when he first committed, because they were frustrated with the loss of Jacarius Peak and Hollywood Smothers and Cam Coleman and some of those guys, they just didn't want to hear they were adding a defensive lineman from Mississippi State. That just was not really a big name. And so he ended up catching the brunt end, and just his reaction to that was heartbreaking, as far as he just wants to prove himself. I thought he handled it fantastic. But when I watched him, I don't think we realized this is a former top, I know that at least one recruiting service, it was Rivals, had him as a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. The industry rankings had him at around the 140 range. I think the other two, 24/7 and at the time On 3, had him in like just outside of the top 200. But overall, the industry rankings had him at 141, I believe. And he went to North Carolina, ended up transferring to Mississippi State. He had kind of dealt with some injuries a little bit. But this is a guy from a run-stopping perspective, has the versatility to play as a zero tech all the way out to being more of a 4, a 4-eye, a 5, a 3-4 defensive end type, give you some, more of a B and C gap presence out there from a size perspective and help stop in the run game. We talk about Terrence Green. I do think he's going to be vital. But a guy like Kedrick Bingley Jones, I think he's going to play a much bigger role and was a much better get than a lot of Alabama fans initially realized.
Yeah, don't be the fan that didn't think adding him was a big deal, but at the same time, you've been down in the dumps about what Indiana did to Alabama in the Rose Bowl, because basically Indiana beat Alabama's eyes shut with 22 guys, a lot like Kedrick Bingley Jones, who were older, mature guys that know the sport because they've been playing it so long. Just older, mature guys. That's what so many Alabama fans wanted after they're like, why can't we be more like Indiana? Well, this is literally like one of those Indiana guys. And there's nothing wrong. Hey, if you're going to be older at a spot on the football field where it's really going to benefit you, is the line of scrimmage. This is the place to be 25. Is as a matter of fact, with the new rules that were implemented this week, Kedrick Bingley Jones is grandfathered in because they're not going to kick anybody out. But in the future, there won't be any of him because they'll be timed out, over age. But Alabama can use him while they got him. It's perfectly allowable and legal for him to be out there. And again, it just reminds me of how many Indiana players were 23, 24 years old last year.
Yeah, 100%. So I just thought that it was a great interview. We'll be reacting more to it. There's some more points that he made that I think we should definitely be diving into at some point. So we'll be getting into that whenever we're back. But obviously, Jimmy, appreciate your time. Know that you have been super busy. So just getting you on here for an episode has been fantastic. Good conversation as always. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then get on over to roadback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.